Let's see the transmission. We should be live now.
Talking about the transmission, right.
Talking about the transmission. We should be transmitting things. Looks like we are with two concurrent transmitting viewers.
Are we live?
We are live.
All right.
Here we are. Live. It is Monday.
Thanks for the heads up.
Oh, I thought. Well, didn't we talk about that? I thought we were gonna live stream today, and then
Yeah, I just didn't know we were live.
Well, here we are.
All right.
Live. Here we are. Anyways, welcome back to Get the Mic, everyone.
Apparently we're live.
Glad to see you all here. Apparently, we're live. Brock did not know. I sprung it on him as a surprise. So today we are covering Dragon Ball as usual, but we'll go ahead and do our little introduction. Let's Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. And on this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball, and in particular, Dragon Ball Episode 113, The Siege on Chow Castle. On Chow Castle? It's one of those.
Siege on Chow Castle.
And so, before we get started, though, if you like what you hear in the show, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel with that red like button. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube. Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble, so check us out on those platforms. This is one of those days, as you can see, Monday. That's kind of why we're live streaming. I don't think there's anything else to say before we get started, other than our mics are busted. We need new mics. Donate to give us new mics. I'm just kidding. You don't have to donate. But there may be a lull in production because I don't want to work with these things anymore. I'm about ready to throw them out the window. Anything else?
No, I think we're good to go.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started. This is episode 113, The Siege of Chow Castle. So the first thing we see is Piccolo has arrived at the King's Castle, which is actually called the King's Castle in the sub. I'm not sure. Chow is, I'm not sure, a good translation of it. But the other title in the Japanese is the King's Castle on the offensive and defensive. So we thought the siege at least had some action words in there for it. But
Yeah, I like that it's regardless of which translation it is, it always seems to come around to dog puns. So
yes. So here it is, the dog pun. But yes, Piccolo has arrived at the King's Castle, claiming that that the world would be better in the flames of chaos, as he uses his laser eyes to destroy the dragon radar that Pilaf had set up in his flying fortress. The town around the castle celebrates the anniversary of their beloved king's rule as Piccolo flies overhead, and Piano comments about the cheering crowd celebrating the arrival of Piccolo. The king, participating in the parade, gives a short speech about peace and harmony before a pageant of girls from all over the world each give him a bouquet of flowers. Meanwhile, Piccolo slowly overwhelms the defenders of the castle, with the captain attempting to prevent panic. So this first setup, the very first thing we see when he's still on the peel-off flying machine and he watches the world burn and he takes glee in that, that's one glimpse that we see of how Piccolo is going to proceed forward through this. He's going to be anti-being, as we know, from Piccolo's spirit, let's say. And so, of course, he wants to, and it's almost serendipitous for him to have such a revered ruler for him to supplant. It's almost better that way for him. If he was supplanting a ruler who was not revered, who was a tyrant, and the world was already in chaos, it wouldn't make as big of a difference.
yeah, it is that dichotomy that he is representing here. And so there's this great mirroring between the benevolence of this king and the fact that characters like Snow have a place in his kingdom, right? And that they participate in that peace. And then, of course, the mirroring of that, which is that they have no place in Piccolo's kingdom. And so, as Piccolo comes and he's trying to supplant the throne, because it's very important that he's doing this and not trying to just destroy the world, it's showing that he has an articulation of his wish, right? That he actually is going to enact what it means to be the king of the world, whereas Pilaf couldn't really comprehend what that entailed. And it's kind of like a dog chasing a car, right? Whereas Piccolo knows exactly what he's going to do in this situation.
Right. It's not all unarticulated chaos, but ordered malice. Right.
It's directed upward to subvert everything, right? So he goes to the top of the known hierarchy, which is the king of the world.
And to be clear, too, this king is very representative of that idea of philosopher kings being the best rulers, right? He's benevolent. Yeah. And if he could just live forever, those kinds of people could just live forever. The people of the world would suffer less because of that. And we kind of see that here with the king, like his speech and all that. He talks about, and I understand that like the king is not supposed to be a multifaceted character, but he's a symbol of that benevolent ruler, the wise king that rules, that has also tamed, and this is why he's a dog,
right?
Tamed his bestial ways almost. Let's say he is someone who knows how to use their sword but keeps it sheathed.
Exactly. I think we had made that analogy too before, where it is the meek, right? And he's supposed to be meek in that sense, where he's
not a fighter.
We know that Pilaf had pointed out that his fortress was like the best defended in the world, right? So he has the technology to rule the world. He could do what the Red Ribbon Army did, right? He could roll over the world with the technology that he has, that he defends the castle. And yet, that's something that, of course, has to be sort of tread upon by Piccolo on this path, and he has to essentially reset what it means to defend that, right? Because as he had done in the previous episode, he's established himself as that dragon type figure, right? And so this is him hoarding up all of the gold. This is him gathering up all of the wealth of the kingdoms and putting it underneath himself, right?
And I also want to mention too, it's something that Piccolo has to do as on the unholy path, because the king is participating in this ceremony. It's almost like a Mardukian ceremony, right? It's where the king proves that he's a good king by accepting people from all over his lands, right? And acknowledging them and venerating them instead of himself.
Right, and taking responsibility for their hardships, right? So they would come to him, I think in the previous episode, and said that they had a drought, and he fixed it by relocating water to help their...
Diverting resources, sure, yeah.
And so it shows him in the process of A, making the proper sacrifices, right, to create peace, and B, it's almost like by taking responsibility of the happenings of the world, he's taking sort of the sins of the world, or he's taking on essentially the flaws inherent in the way that the kingdom is operating onto himself. And so that's what Marduk does, right? Whenever he puts himself, what would you say, prostrate in front of everybody and lets them ask him if he is a good Marduk. This is sort of a ritualistic reenactment in a parade.
And so Piccolo has to say that this is beneath him. Piccolo is above the idea of subordinating himself to this. This is the kind of ruler he'll be.
Exactly.
Right? And so he starts slowly taking out the castle's defenders from the back. And he kind of just does this like menacing walk as they like try and shoot him, and he just like knocks him out of the way and kills him.
Yeah, there's no pomp and circumstance to it as a sort of...
He's just like, where's the king?
It's really interesting because
where's the king?
It is an inversion of the parade, right? Because Piccolo could come in in a sort of as a show, right, to show his power. And instead of doing anything showy, he's just like casually walking in and casting people aside with no effort, right? Instead of what a parade is, right, which is sort of this over-the-top celebration. It's totally it's like an aesthetic celebration, right? And so it's funny because it's like with no pomp and circumstance, Piccolo walks in and subverts the entire root of the kingdom. and they're in the process of sort of putting all of their resources into an aesthetic of how amazing the kingdom is, right?
Exactly. And so, the last thing we really see is the captain telling all the guards to like handle it. He gives them like tanks. He's like, "Go handle this. I don't want there to be panic." And it's a wise thing to admit, because the debasing of the institution of the Mardukian ritual would be something that would undermine the belief system of society itself.
It's anti-society.
And so it would destroy the belief system that commonly and communally holds the peace in this land. And so the next thing we see is back in the land of Korin. Goku and Yajirobe finally get to Bora and Upa. And Goku is able to reunite with his friends, and he still wants to go see Korin, who's at the top of the tower, of course. And Goku convinces the Yaj to take him up the tower, promising him wizard food in return. Bora helps them start, and they begin to climb the tower. In the wasteland, Tien stands over the bodies of Roshi and Chaozu, lamenting his dishonor at being the last alive, or the only one alive, one of those. The others catch up to him, with Yamcha offering to help, but Tien refuses and leaves alone. So we get back to our heroes now, and there's a couple things to mention about the exchange with Goku and Yajirobe. There also one other thing that I guess I didn't mention in the summary would be Goku is, to Bora and Upa's surprise, so weak that he can't even spar with Upa. Like, sparring with Upa makes Goku collapse. And Bora basically indicates that he's seriously injured, right? That he'll never be able to make it up the tower.
Right, it's not something that Goku as an identity can now shoulder. It's not a burden that he can carry in his state. He's in a death rebirth process right now, right? And he is not able to find the strength to carry himself up the spiritual ladder, right? Because he's literally been laid low by Piccolo.
Right. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak at this moment.
Yeah,
Indicating, right, that the spirit of Goku has been damaged by his interaction with
well, that's
Piccolo.
why it's sort of that inversion though, because the flesh is very it's carried out by Yajirobe, right? And his desire for earthly
Right,
things.
it's an externalization of it, right? Because you have
So,
Goku's spirit and
yeah.
flesh, but Goku, as we've said,
Yeah,
this
Goku
whole
as
time,
an actor can't be the one propelling this,
is
right?
representative of a spirit.
Yeah.
And so his actor becomes Yajirobe, and he convinces him by promising him wizard food.
Wizard food.
And it's great because it's magical. It is the sustenance that Yajirobe seeks and needs in his own being that propels him forward. Not only here, but in the next episode as well.
Yes.
And it's significant to say that his analog to Goku throughout this arc is very meaningful. This is what Goku, with an insatiable, or without the proper nourishment, right? This is someone who has found the strength to be self-sufficient and put themselves in order, but
without a direction, without their path with them.
With no path, let's say. No
or the
way,
path.
And no nourishment to find that way.
Right.
And so it is significant for Yajirobe to be here on this journey. And so he eventually decides to go for the wizard food, and Bora throws them as high as he can. And as soon as they start climbing, Yajirobe's like, I still can't see the top. What's going on? And Goku basically tells him, we're almost there. We get that joke going on throughout this episode.
Right.
So then we're with Ten Shinhan and the rest of the crew. It's significant to know. It's almost as if his Ten Shinhan's ideal and the innocence that he values was destroyed in one fell swoop. And I think That's kind of the dishonor that he's indicating, that he thinks his spirit is instantiated, let's say, less valuably than the other two.
Mm-hmm. Say that last part back again. That he's instantiated.
The reason he feels dishonored
Mm-hmm.
is because he doesn't feel that his spirit is instantiated as valuably as the other two, as, let's say, Chaozu and Roshi,
Yeah, I think that.
because he still thinks he needs to redeem himself for his actions before. Chaozu didn't have that kind of redemption necessary because he was innocent already, and Roshi just gave up the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah, I
So
think
him
that.
being the last alive, he feels bad about that because he feels like he's the least valuable to do it, or the least worthy to be alive out of the three of them.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I'm sort of seeing an analog to what's happening with Goku and the Yaj, and then this process for Tien and the reflection in Yamcha, right? Because there's Yamcha's leg has been broken by Tien. He's unable to go out on this path, right? And Tien is taking it all onto himself, and we'll see that more as we get into the next episode. And it's sort of this thing where it's like there is an interesting dichotomy there in what reason is Tien doing this? It's almost a self-serving way where there is a certain selfishness in believing that the responsibility should fall on you.
And also knowing that he denies Yamcha. He says, only I can do this.
Right.
And he also knows that it is a sacrificial thing. Right? He knows that if he uses it, he'll die.
It's like to make the decision for someone else whether or not they're worthy to make that self-sacrifice is a selfish thing. It is a self-centered thing. And I think that Tien still has that growing to do. You know, he has come a long way, but it's still...
He doesn't actually... He doesn't understand the sacrifice that he should make.
Yeah, I think we'll get into that a little bit more further on.
We will a little more, but it's a good to talk about it now, because Yamcha offering to help and Tien rejecting it, that is one of the reasons
it's a lack
why
of humility.
Later on, we see Tien is not successful in what he's trying to do.
Right. I think it is a result of that lack of humility, because this really is about centering and finding humility and the self-centeredness of what Yajirobe's doing, where it's the only thing propelling him forward is something that serves to nourish him. It's almost to say that Tien is trying to...
There are so many themes in this arc. There's like hope, despair, right? Sacrifice, humility.
But yeah, it's almost to say that that Tien is following sort of a self-serving path by trying to elevate himself to the status of a Roshi without having it. Yeah.
Right, that way, exactly. He's thinking the ends
without realizing that he's missing wisdom that Yamcha might have, right? Through enacted training.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is, I think too, it goes back to that idea of Tien thinking that he is the least valuable among the three to be alive, and specifically because he tells Chaozu to jump out there. Does he? No, Chaozu does it on his own. He tells him.
I think he does. He says, Chaozu, this is the only chance.
Yeah, he I was thinking for a second he didn't, because I remember he couldn't talk, but he telepathically.
Yeah, and then that happens, and we kind of talked about how that's
he
killing that innocence.
Yes. And so he even laments that his.
But yeah, I think this is kind of an overcorrection to the killing of that innocence, which is sort of like saying, you know, now I have to embody the spirit of the Father.
Now I'm Atlas, and I have to carry the whole world. Yeah. Good. And so he leaves, and the last thing we see with them is Launch saying, "That bastard." And she is, I think by saying that, she's doing a couple things. She's acknowledging that he's not on a holy path, but it is something respectable for him to try to shoulder that responsibility to begin.
Yeah, that's the aspect of him that Launch admires as well, right?
Yeah.
That he has the capacity to be a bastard, right? That he has that savage nature to him, and that he's able to use it at times. And so she sort of loves and hates that. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
The sort of the dichotomy that she lives inside of.
Oh yeah. So, and that's kind of where we end off with our heroes. That's kind of the last major thing that happens, because the rest of the episode is devoted to Piccolo finishing off the defenders of Chow Castle. So the soldiers of the castle attempt to hold Piccolo at bay, but to no avail, with one explosion disrupting the ceremony. With the people in panic, Piccolo enters the castle only to find a large man to fight. Piccolo kills him easily, with Piano spotting out the king's attempt to flee via airplane or hover car, whatever you want to call it. And so a couple things here. The way that Piccolo kills this henchman, this guard, I guess, he thrusts his hand through his chest, and we'll see that later on too. But it's almost an instantiation of how, because let's say it reminds me of a butter cutting through a knife. It's something that eases through, or like a sword cutting through paper. It shows the ease in which Piccolo is able to manipulate and destroy this. I want to say person. Destroy this guy, and what I mean by that is the size of his strength. It doesn't matter to Piccolo, because Piccolo's waging a spiritual war, and so he can almost like a ghost, like just cut through and destroy the person at their core.
Yeah, and that's what he's doing by casually walking in here.
Yes.
And not using any weapons, not using any show, and only essentially killing people who try to stop him, right? Because he's not just walking up and hunting them down or anything.
Right.
He simply has a path that he's walking.
He says, "Where's the king?" He even tells this guy, like, "Where's the king? I'll let you live. You tell me where the king is." He's like, "No, I'll never tell you." Dead.
Yep. But yeah, I think that's how Piccolo operates.
Mm-hmm.
In that he understands that
He can
something
get to
that
the heart
Goku
of the
didn't
matter.
understand whenever he went up against the Red Ribbon Army, right? Which is that he knows exactly where to go and how to get there. Now, Goku wanted to do that, but we see that part of what he was learning in the process of coming up against the Red Ribbon Army is sort of how to integrate that malice, and then knowing when to actually have it sheathed so that you can become sort of more like King here as someone who's meek. And so this is the unleashing of that, where it's like that mode of being, but turned against the good.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so he's not running around destroying things like Goku, but he is just
on the
on his unholy
straight line
path.
towards the top of this mountain, this hierarchy, right?
Exactly. And so he has pretty much conquered the castle at that point. Last thing we see for the episode is Goku and Yajirobe finally get to the top of Korin Tower, just as the residents of King's Castle Township begin to despair, stating that there is no one who can possibly help them. Just then, Sano looks to the sky and calls out, saying that Goku is the only one. Lastly, Piccolo stands perched on the king's plain, ready to commit all kinds of atrocities in the name of evil. And that's the last that we see of the episode, actually. We got through this one pretty quick. There's a lot that happens, but it's very bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, it's a lot of setup for the next episode as well.
Yes.
Because we finally get to pay off where both of these plot lines are going.
All three, really.
Yeah.
Because we get a glimpse of Tien,
yeah,
too.
that too.
But yeah, I agree. So, really, in this episode, just to sum things off, really, this is about Piccolo debasing the idea of benevolent kings in general, the idea of the ceremony where the king prostrates himself before the crowd. And we see Yaj seeking that nourishment, which is leading them on their quest. We see Tien make I don't want to say an unholy decision, but it's definitely not on the path. And so we kind of get these converging storylines that will come together even further in the next episode. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think this last section. I mean, Sano one recognizes that
Oh,
Goku is the
yeah.
spirit that needs to be called forth to be able to protect them from something as powerful as Piccolo. Now, this is just because obviously she's had her experience with Goku and she saw how he was able to bring order back from the chaos that was being imposed from a tyrannical
Well, hold
uh,
on. Hold on.
hierarchy, let's say.
Because she knows too that Android 8 is really strong. She didn't cry out to Android 8, right?
Right.
It's Goku's spirit that she understands is what is necessary. And as Sano acted in the Muscle Tower arc, she was the archetypal female who could sense out and protect the hero from things like we've talked about before. And so in this instance, her recognizing this and indicating to the people who are despairing that the hero, the spirit of the hero, is what defeats Piccolo. That's an important thing to mention. It's showing that Sano has that wisdom of that. And it's not just to say, oh, she's just crying out to the main character. It's like, well, I mean, she is, but she is prompted to by what happens before she says that. It's not like in later, or in, let's say, later seasons of Dragon Ball Z, where people just cry out for Goku. Just Goku.
Well, and specifically what she knows about Goku as well is that not only can he defeat something that's malicious or evil, but he can create habitable order and goodness from it. In that, he went into the belly of the beast and came back with a good android, right?
Yes.
What could be salvaged from, what could be learned as wisdom? It's sort of turning it against the
and of course,
unholy manner that it was at, and finding the good in it.
Sano knows that the Red Ribbon Army was destroyed.
Yeah.
So
But
she knows that too.
To point that out about Goku, that is what would defeat evil, right? And so she's seeing right now that there's this. I mean, it's a tower. Ultimately, this castle is another tower, right? We always see this. And what did she see? She saw Goku topple a tyrannical tower and come back with good to turn that chaos into something orderly, which is, you could say, a machine operating in the service of good, right? And so, again, she knows who can topple the malicious tower that's being topped by Piccolo in this situation, but Goku, who could turn the bad of the situation into something good.
That's why I included this part of the episode. But yeah, because this actually doesn't happen here. That scene happens probably 5 minutes before the end, but I moved it to the end because it lines up better.
Yeah, this episode jumps around a lot.
But anyways, I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys enjoyed what you heard, please give us a like. Subscribe to our channel. We upload new episodes Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. Give us a subscribe. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
We hope you guys enjoyed yourselves tonight and have a good rest of your week. Till Thursday. Then you'll see us Thursday. Goodbye.